Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello and welcome to the 25th episode of the Extreme Sports Performance Podcast. My name's Ryan Blake, I'm the founder and director of Extreme Sports Performance. In this episode, I'm talking to Alex Wolf. Alex is a strength and conditioning coach and co-founder of a new company called Wayfaring. We chat leadership, team development, thriving in uncertain environments, and understanding needs of individuals amongst organisations. I also ask him the questions I ask all my guests: who he is, what he does, where has he come from and what has he done along the way, what are the key moments from his career so far, what are his top areas of interest, what are the most valuable things he's learnt, what are his top resources for information, what are his top pieces of advice, and finally, where can people find him. This was a really insightful and enjoyable discussion. Hope you get a lot out of listening to it. Here we go. Alex, welcome to the Extreme Sports Performance Podcast. Please could you start by telling everyone who you are and what you do?
Well, I used to be a strength and conditioning coach and used to work for the English Institute of Sport for 15 years, where I had eight roles, I think, over that 15, 16 years, which resulted in working with leading some of the British rowing programme in strength conditioning, then the head of S&C within for the EIS, looking after all the strength conditioning practitioners within the organisation, and then more latterly, in the last 2.5 years, was head of learning, which was looking at the learning and development needs of the individuals and the organisation, in particular preparation for Olympic and Paralympic Games, and the wider needs of the entire staff of the organisation. In October last year, I left to set up my own company, and I now have two sides to a company. One is still working in sport, and it's working with a number of clients in the Chinese Olympic Committee, in baseball in the States, and some work in South America, and some smaller bits within the UK with clubs and organisations. And then the other side is a company I've set up with two colleagues of mine called Wayfaring, which is looking at using the experiences of sport to go into other businesses to look at looking at performance, particularly around leadership, collaborative teams and well-being. So my time's kind of divided between those two things at the moment. So yeah, quite diverse, but drawing on the old and kind of trying to forge something for the new for ourselves as well.
Fantastic. Well, no, thanks very much for those insights and explanations. I remember when we had a coffee a month or so ago, you were telling me why you decided on that name, Wayfaring. Would you mind telling the listeners what you told me?
Yeah, okay. So we were debating about the name of the company, and you know what it was all about, our principles and our kind of philosophical approach to what we believe, and all three of us have young kids, and there's a scene in Moana, the Disney movie, where Moana and Maui are on a raft sailing through the South Pacific somewhere, and Moana turns around to Maui and said, "Oh, we're sailing," and Maui turns around and said, "No, we're wayfaring. Wayfaring is this idea of you don't know where you're going, but you use your past experiences in the present to help navigate an unknown future, and that's kind of how he describes it. And we kind of really like the idea of like we don't have a finite path ahead of us, and there's infinite possibilities, but we have all our own experiences and all our own insights that we've had previously, and we use them in the present to help kind of guide us for the future. And it's kind of our kind of metaphorical way of describing the way in which we work, that we don't just describe or come to an end point. We don't know what that end point will be, but we help people navigate to an uncertain future, which I think probably as we go through the next few years and the last few years, you're seeing it's getting more and more uncertain about what's going on. So yeah, we basically stole it from a Disney cartoon.
Love it. Fantastic. No, that's really cool. And it's probably a really good time to kind of lead into the next question. So would you mind going into a bit more detail about a typical client towel you would have with Wayfaring, and maybe some typical services you may offer them?
So we started in kind of more like the learning and development space, and sort of offering, I suppose, opportunities for clients to understand our experiences within high performance sports, and then how you can transfer those experiences into other industries. And performance wherever you are, and what you define performance kind of is the first bit. So the first bit we've always kind of got to is this kind of idea of working backwards from performance. So do you understand what your performance is within your space, and then we help them work through how to build their performance plan around that. So it's using very much kind of the metaphors of or the processes we've used within high performance sport, performance plan around that. We've also done some bits. One of our big bits is around problem solving. So Wayfaring genuinely believes in the creative and the collective, so that and there's a big piece out there at the moment around cognitive diversity, and that if you need different styles of thinking and different ways of problem solving to help solve the problem. So working out problems on your own is a lot more challenging than having lots of diverse ways of people thinking. So we have a kind of a problem solving framework and a problem solving process that we take people through to help understand where they are in that space. So a lot of it's around, do we actually understand what the real problem is? So we get clarity on that of the problem. Then it's ideas on how to potentially solve that problem, and then this idea of action, of like how do you turn those ideas into actionable outcomes, and we help clients work through that, and they can enter it at any point through that process. But we take them through this process where it brings in people that they want to help solve that problem with them. So it's a very it's quite processy, but it by the end of it, there's a genuine action plan around it. And then there's a bit around leadership, or a lot around leadership and our experiences of what good leadership is. And we actually got a meeting on Monday to kind of finalise this process, which we're going to be a bit more structured over the next 12 to 18 months on, of the key things that we believe are important for leadership. And it's kind of drawing a lot of stuff from like Brené Brown and Simon Sinek, and what they believe around, and what they talk about around leaderships and successful organisations, and it's helping those organisations understand their roles as leaders, and this fundamental piece that everybody is a leader, regardless of role, and how we help individuals understand what leadership means to them and the type of leader they want to be. And then we do another piece which links to that, is around kind of effective teamwork or collaboration, and how they effectively collaborate with one another, which goes right the way back up to the leadership piece of like what people believe, what the leaders believe about the individuals of that organisation. is exactly how those people will feel within that organisation. So, like, how do we want those people to feel? And how, so we work with organisations to help navigate that a little bit better. So it's primarily around the metaphors of sport, problem solving, leadership, and collaborative, and working as a team. And the final bit, we're just starting to work on. When I was leaving the EIS, one of my streams of work was about well-being and self-care, and particularly in preparation for the Tokyo Games within the British Olympic Association, where I was doing some work with them, is to understand what well-being means for an individual and at an organisation level, what an organisation can do to support well-being, what an individual needs to, or help individuals work out what healthy well-being is for them, and what self-care looks like, and particularly when you go into a high-pressure environment, like the Olympic Games, you'll be there for like 5-6 weeks. Do you know what you need to do basically to manage your well-being, and help everybody in that group understand what everyone else's needs are, so that if someone needs to go off for a run in the afternoon, or they need to take themselves out of the environment for an hour to decompress, it's not frowned upon. And I think traditionally, I'm talking more specifically here about games experiences, people kind of think that you have to grind yourself for 18, 19 hours a day. And actually it's giving people, like, actually we don't need to do that, and we need to be much more mindful around people's well-being. So that's the other bit we're starting to put on, and we'll start developing over the next year, is like what we can offer around that space too.
Fantastic. No, that's incredibly interesting, Alex. Thanks very much for going into so much detail with that. How many new things did you find that you needed to find out about or learn to set up this project, with regards to how many things you already knew from your past experiences?
That's a good question. I was having this conversation yesterday morning with an old EIS colleague. There are things that, if you look at it from a company point of view, and actually then from a project point of view, there were things I had no idea about around tax laws and accountancy and all this kind of thing, which has taken probably the most amount of my time around just getting all of that stuff up and running. And I've never spent more time. I think when we met for coffee, I was about to go to see my accountant, but I've never spent more time in an accountant's or a solicitor's office in the last 3 months. And that's been quite an eye-opening experience. But from a project point of view, I think the Wayfaring originated from the three of us, from this idea.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
We've done a lot of people development within the Institute of Sport previously, and while we were working in strength conditioning as heads of service or technical leads, which were looking after a group of individuals within a region, our primary focus was about support, challenge, and welfare of our staff. And we wanted to be much more deliberate and systematic in the way in which we did that. So the project of Wayfaring, I suppose, came about from our desire to do things better, and our inquisitiveness of well, it kind of works in the high performance sport environment, and does it work? Can we translate what we've done in sport into other experiences and other industries and environments? And I think, broadly, yes, it can, and I think because we use our metaphor of sport, it does transfer. But around the learning piece, the more you read, the more you realise you don't know very much, and then you surround yourself with some really great people, which we have, and they've challenged us quite heavily around what we believe, which has been great. And I think the bits that stick out for me are we can't make. When we first came out, when we first brought the project alive, it was quite an abstract idea. So our kind of strapline was reimagining ourselves to live a life that makes a difference. So this kind of future state of like we're making a difference in the future, but we don't know what that is. But people don't understand, and when we get pushed, we don't really understand what that really means. It's kind of like a nice strapline of like something in the future. We all want to make a difference, and we all want to make a difference in our lives and others. But no one really got it. And so my big learning was like you've got to take the abstract and make it a lot more tangible, so people can touch and feel what you're actually offering. Which is why we're much more clear around we do stuff around leadership, we do stuff around teams, we do stuff about things around well-being, so people actually understand kind of a general idea about what leadership is. So when we start talking about leadership, we can go, well, these are the things that we believe are hugely important, and this is where we're going to spend our time focusing. And so not so much this abstract idea of that we're going to make a difference in our lives. Like, well, what does that really mean? So that's my first bit, and that we've had a lot of help around kind of. I hate using this word, but it's almost like the productization of what we have.
Yeah.
We almost had to get to a point where we could just explain it very simply to people, like, well, this is what we're doing, and then people got it, and then you wouldn't sit in a cafe talking to somebody for 45 minutes explaining something which you could say in a single sentence, and that's taken us a long time to get our head around. And the other bit is this idea of if we genuinely believe that the kind of the metaphor of wayfaring, of like we use our previous experiences to help navigate an unknown future, then we can't really have a predefined product for people, and that's really kind of opposite to what I just said about the productization. But the idea is that we need to be able to be much better at going in, and we kind of loosely call it like a task appraisal, which is we go in and we appraise what the people we're working with really need, rather than us going in and saying, well, you want to do this is what we've got. And we might use we definitely do use the things that we have, but we have a degree of flexibility of working with our clients about what they actually need, rather than us shoehorning something that we think they might need. So we've had to work a lot harder at doing a really good appraisal at the start of the of any interaction. So there was, I'll give you an example. I did something with an NGB last year, and it took probably 20 to 25 hours of meetings and conversations with the client to really work out what was going on. And every time we thought we got there, like, they looked at it and it kind of looked all right, but it wasn't quite right. So we just had to keep on going. So, and actually, I think, what's his name? Einstein says if you have an hour to solve a problem, you spend 55 minutes working out what the real problem is, and 5 minutes to actually create the solution.
Yeah.
And that's our bit, is like, we need to solve the right problem. So that entry point is now our probably biggest piece of the work we do. And probably what we end up doing is, like, we end up doing a lot of that entry piece to help people really. That's the problem solving piece, I suppose, which is like we're really good at helping people problem solve. And then it's a choice whether or not they want to continue with the work in which we do, or they go elsewhere to go and do that. Because sometimes I think when you go and properly problem solve, and one of our kind of ideas is that you have to test that, and we test it in their environment, and we'll find ways to test any the kind of the clarity of the problem, or if that's a real problem, and if the rest of the organisation feels like that. So we have ways that we go in and start discussing and capturing insights and intel from them, and then prepare the leadership about what they're about to hear, because it might not be what they think it is, and that's kind of that's probably our biggest learning bit, is actually if you get that bit right, then whatever comes out from the back end becomes a lot easier, because you're really, really specific and have a high degree of clarity of what you're trying to change at that moment, and that can change over time as well. And the more and more we do this, the more and more you realise that it's I don't know if you've read Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game. Like, it's a really nice way of like that. It's a long game, and if you look at life as quarterly budgets and annual returns and so on, like all you're looking to do is improve each of those quarters or annual returns. Where actually, I think people are starting to look at it as a much more longer game, and actually for that we need to look at how things change over time, and then mould or help support the organisation to navigate change as they go through the next generation. And that's our big thing. It's stop being so transactional and being much more longitudinal, and like, what does the next generation need? What does the company need to be in the next generation? And if we know what that is, then what does the people need to be able to do during the next generation to be able to still be there in 30 years' time? So there are big kind of learnings around just how we operate more than, and I'm not saying we don't learn from around leadership and people and so on. We do. We spend an awful lot of time reading, but I think the big things is just how we interact and engage and kind of have an entry point with our clients.
Fantastic. Now, that's incredibly interesting. Again, thanks again for going into so much detail about that. I can definitely relate to what you mean in the latter part of what you just said with regards to managing long-term projects. And I used to approach things wanting to have like mini or micro solutions for all these things that might crop up to try and achieve, I suppose, more short-term success. But as time's gone on, and the more time I've spent involved in these projects, I've kind of now got the opposite approach. I'm looking much more towards the end goal and the present result, or the present state, because it's forever like has like this organic change about it, and I think nothing will ever stay the same. But I think trying to put systems and processes in place to make sure that is always as positive as it can be, but then just being content knowing that it will never stay the same is helped me in my approach with all the things I do in work and life and coaching. So
I've got a colleague of mine, Divyata, who used to work in the industry but now works at Henley Business School, and her PhD was in knowledge management, but it was really around emergent complexity and change. And she's massively influenced my thinking around this idea of that we live in a complex world. The world is ever changing, and we have a high degree of new emerging things that we need to deal with. And when we're working the EIS, because we have a target, like we have to win 67 plus medals in Tokyo or whatever it might be. But there is this defined point that we have to get to. And because we work in 4-year cycles, we never we never stop, or we never stopped and really looked, okay, what would we need to be in another 8 years, or what do we need to be by 2050, and how do we survive in a world which is ever changing? So if we only ever looked at the Olympic Games, that's ahead of us, and we don't really pay attention to the Olympic Games, which are 16, 20, 24 years away. Where do we get to? So that made me really think about how we have to look at that space. And it's really challenging when you have kind of finite goals every 4 years, but the long game is like it's more than just winning medals. It's about the well-being of the athletes that we work with. It's about inspiring a nation to be active and healthy lifestyles, or get them into participating in these sports. And there's all these bigger pieces which sit around it, but we never talk about them. We only ever talk about what's happening in 4 years. And I think this idea of, and this is part of our leadership model within Wayfaring as well, is like we need to understand what complexity really is. We really need to understand this idea of emergence of that. If we have such a set plan, and we've got this single route where we're going, like we give ourselves no space to deal with things that crop up. And we all, this the real world, isn't it? Like nothing goes to plan. I was doing some DIY over the weekend, and I thought I'd just do a bit of filling and a bit of painting, and And so by the time you get there, you realise you've taken half the wall down, and you have to replaster the wall. Like, things emerge as you start doing simple things, and I think that's the challenge that we face. And I think that's the bit which, when we're looking at long-term planning, is like we need kind of like be able to send the spotlight in the right direction. Like, we're going north, but it's not so pinpoint of north that it has the ability to kind of navigate its way in that kind of direction and kind of get us there in a way which isn't so predefined. And I think that's where we, with the planning, which I think is really difficult, is for people to like, is that we don't have a plan, but people cling to plans because it gives them security, and actually people feel insecure without a plan. And actually, what we're saying is, like, it's all right not to have a plan. We just need to kind of know the direction we're going, and we'll help navigate it, taking one step at a time to kind of work out what the next thing is.
Sure, no, that makes complete sense, and I can strongly relate to that. There's lots of graphics or graphs of success over time that you can find on the internet.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Which have straight lines on the first image, and then a squiggly line going backwards and upside down on the bottom image. And I can really strongly relate to that. And I've had one of those on one of the gyms I've coached in for a while on the door. And every time someone comes in, everyone always sees it and always kind of giggles to themselves because they completely get it. Like, the path to success is not a straight line. It's so twisty-turny, and you never know what to expect. And I think you need that buffering capacity, or those gaps, to be able to catch up with yourself or allow for change along the way.
In the very first bit of Simon Sinek's book, the Infinite Game, he talks about you're on a road and you come to a crossroad, and it's got a sign, and it says, and on one arrow it's pointing to success, and the other it's pointing to fulfillment. And he talked about success as this idea of, a finite goal that you try and do, and success would be, getting an increase in your quarterly return, a quarterly budget report. Your quarterly finances, and then this idea of fulfillment, where it's like it's going to be a journey, and this idea that, do you choose success or do you choose fulfillment? And I think traditionally, most people go about success, but I think there's a big thing about fulfillment now, about how do people go to work excited, feel safe while at work, and come home fulfilled that they've done something great. And it's not just about this kind of small project they're doing. So I agree. It's like this, that squiggly line. I use something very, very similar. It's like, it's a journey. There'll be ups and downs, but at the end of the day, you might have done some really rubbish stuff at work, but it's been fulfilled day at work. And I think those are the things, or at home, or wherever you may be. But I think that for me is kind of sums up where my head is now. It's like, we can go down the success route, or we can go down to the fulfillment route, and we tend to go down, trying to push it towards the fulfillment.
I've had a similar transition in my life, as I might have discussed with you when we met last, about working in professional sports setting and then coming to work in an educational setting, specialising more in long-term athletic development. And I personally feel a lot more fulfilled in this current role because there's so much value you can add to the people in front of you that you're coaching. I felt there was a lot less value I could add in the previous setup. So that is very important, and I've noticed a big difference in my life and how I feel at the end of each day in with that change. So it's very apparent for me.
Yeah, and that's partly the reason, a large proportion of the reason why I quit in October last year.
Yep.
I was not fulfilled in my life. I realised I was making bigger sacrifices, and the people that suffered the most were my other half and my two kids. Yeah. And I just wasn't seeing them. And my coach's point is like, for what purpose am I actually going to work each day? Because it's not about my fulfilment or their fulfilment anymore, and actually going out on my own, it was like I'd been liberated, I suppose, from this bit. So I had exactly the same feeling of like when you change something, it feels a lot better, and I just feel so much more content at home. And when I'm at home with my family, I'm at home with them mentally as well as actually being there physically.
Of course, yeah. Well, it took me a while to realise this and recognise that, but as you say, when you do recognise it and you can act, positively change it, it's quite an empowering feeling.
Yeah, great.
So, just moving on to the next question, Alex. I think this might sound like a simple one to the listeners, but it's probably going to be far from simple for you to answer. And that would be, what would you say in your entire career, with all of the things you've experienced, with all the things you've done up to now, what would be the most valuable things that you've learnt?
Anyone who ever listens to me when I've been in a position of leadership, I talk about this time when I was at school, and I was told when I was probably 14 or 15, I think it was, just before I was doing my GCSEs, that I should really consider going into doing an apprenticeship to be a mechanic or something along those lines, because I found reading and writing incredibly difficult when I was younger. I still do today, and because of that, the education system was really, I found it incredibly difficult. I didn't enjoy my school life at all. I found it incredibly difficult. And when that person told me that I should probably do something like that, that really kind of, I thought, well, why would I think that? And it kind of made me think that the system wasn't geared up for everybody. It was geared up for the masses, but it didn't. It kind of, people like myself, it left on the fringes, and like it wasn't a failure of me or my family. It was a failure of a system which couldn't work with individuals which struggled with reading and writing. And I don't know if it probably is a degree of dyslexia which was at play, and that spurred me on, and it still does, and I still reference it quite regularly. It used to be like this big FU to that person's like that. That's why I've gone to university, why I've done a couple of masters. I've started an MBA. Like it's like that they were, it was almost to prove a point to her that she doesn't know what she's talking about. But actually, as I've got older, it's kind of, it probably is start off like that. But now it's just a reminder of like, I can do whatever I want if I want to do it. So that's my first bit of just. You hear everyone say it, about not giving up, and if you do want to go after something, you can, but you do have to work bloody hard at it. And my mum tells me the story after I finished this is 2003 or 4, I think it was, when I finished my masters down at Chichester University, and she was asking me once at graduation like what I was going to do. And I said, I'm going to go and work in elite sport, and Mum was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, like that kind of raised eyebrow, like, well, maybe not, but don't get your hopes too high. And I think a year later, I was working as an intern up in Sheffield with the English Institute of Sport, working with elite athletes at the time. And I think that for me was my first big learning of just I had a dream and I had an ambition to go and do that. And those two stories, I think, just, I suppose, highlight for me that if you go after it, you can achieve it. The other ones are very kind of the way have influenced the way I kind of look at life, I suppose. Where was it? There's two events in sport which have definitely shaped my life. So one in 2008, I think it was, or 9, just after Beijing Olympics, I was made redundant from athletics, and working for the Institute of Sport, but working directly with the sport athletics. And the way in which it was dealt was, both from the institute and from the sport, was not great, and it was poorly managed, and I felt really, really unsupported around that time. And then in 2012, I was working with rowing, and I think it was like the 4th of August was the end of the rowing regatta, and no one had really spoken about what happens the day after. And I kind of went AWOL for a period of time, and no one at work rang or spoke to me or tried to find out where I was. And I think you know Dan Howes, but I was living with Dan Howes at the time, and he would often come and find me back home. He was working at Wasps at the time. I'd be sitting on the sofa in my pants, just with a duvet wrapped around me, just watching some rubbish daytime TV, and I was like that for a number of weeks. So I don't know if it was depression or it was a degree of depressive behaviours, but those two things there have really influenced the way in which I look at other people, and my bit is like nobody should ever feel the way I did. So that's really influenced the way in which we put in when I was working in the industry, how we supported our staff going to the games, and just how they, just about their well-being, their support, their welfare. And that's been a massive driver for me around my own personal experiences of how I was made to feel, and actually knowing it's not the right way to be dealt with. And I've done an awful lot while I was in the industry, and even now outside the industry, of like just how we treat people. And the final one, I suppose, is in 2015 was probably a really rubbish year for me. I had so the December 2014, a close friend of mine committed suicide. My granddad died, my dad died, and my nan died, all within 10 months of each other. Wow. So it was quite a really challenging year for me. I think for the whole family, and it was exceptionally difficult at the time. And the two things that resonate with me of that year, or three things I should say. One is just how incredibly close our family was, and like how we helped each other to kind of get through that, and that's made me really think about how much time I spend with them, and not to take them for granted. And we spend a lot more time while we're all over the southeast, and my sister's in the North Wales. We spend a lot more time with each other than we have done previously, and we stay much more connected. And that for me has been a really important bit. Like, you just can't take family for granted. The next bit was it was Chris McAdam, Stu Pickering, and a few other mates from school who were really important people for me at the time, because they were how do you describe it? They were just my rocks and pillars that I could lean on, and I could tell them anything, and they would, there was no judgment, there was no trying to make me feel better, and like I say, I'll be alright. They were just there, and I could pick up the phone, and they would pick up the phone, or I could turn up wherever they were, and then they would be there, and it reminded me of just how important those relationships are, and finding good people that you can spend time with. And I think some people talk about having mentors and having regular mentors. I don't need to go and see a coach or mentor. I need good people like those guys that I can go to, and they will listen. If I want them to challenge me, they'll challenge me. If I want them just to kind of be there, they'll be there. And that's how it's worked. And that really kind of highlighted it for me. So they're kind of like my strong inner circle, I suppose. And the final bit, which probably is the most important, and which has kind of driven the decision to leave.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Leave the EIS and kind of go out on my own. And my dad had retired, and he'd probably only retired for about 18 months to 2 years, I think, maybe. And then he died, and it really shocked me that you kind of get to this idea, like when you retire, that you can have 20 or 30 years of looking after the grandkids and enjoying life, going around the golf courses, just kind of taking life a little bit easier. And he got to do very little of that, and that made me think that actually I need to live life now a lot more, because I was always had this idea of how do you describe it? Always had this idea that you're whatever you're building for the future, and we are, and I know we are, and we still do. But this idea that I need to live in the present a lot more, and to do that, I knew I couldn't do it in the current situation. So, and while I had job changes within the institute, which have allowed me to do more of that, and they were incredibly amazing, and letting me do flexi time and look after my kids on a Friday, and work full time Monday to Thursday, and that was amazing, and it gave me a lot more time with the family. Ultimately, what happened in 2015 has made me really think about living life now and doing what I can. So I don't want to work full time again, because it killed me, and I want to spend more time with my girls. And to do that, the only way I could ever see doing that was going out and working for myself, and that's kind of like a massive driver in my decision making. So, sorry, I waffled a bit there, but they're the kind of three things which have influenced how I suppose my biggest learnings, I suppose.
Well, please don't apologise for waffling. So you weren't at all, and I can relate so much to what you said. I was in and am in a similar position myself, with changes of jobs and roles, and trying to set up my own company as well, slowly over time. Yeah, as difficult as it is, I think that the bigger picture is a good way of describing the main driver for me in terms of kind of quality of life and trying to really positively experience everything around you that enriches your life. It became incredibly apparent to me a lot later than it has for some people, but a lot earlier than it has for others. So I'm happy to have kind of realised what I want and why, and what needs to be done in order to achieve that, much like you have. So good to hear indeed. So I just wanted to finish really by asking you one last question. What would be your top pieces of advice in life, exercise, and or a business? And you can relate that to, from a personal experiences in high performance sport, or experiences that you've come across in your new venture.
I'm gonna credit Akko Atkinson on this first piece.
Yeah.
When I went out over to go and do some work with him when he was over in Italy Rugby, and he'd had 2 kids, and I was expecting our second fairly soon, or might have even had number 2. And he was saying the best bit of advice he was given about kids was, don't listen to anyone else's advice, because you'll work it out because you have to. And that's been my mantra.
Yeah.
Ever since with my kids, and pretty much anything else is like you have to, and therefore you'll find a way. So that's probably my first bit. I think it's easy for me to say this now because I've worked in elite sport for 15, 16 years, and worked in sport for 20 odd years, and I've had to go through the unpaid work and the internships and kind of work my way through. But the other bit is you have to find something that you're passionate for, and if you're passionate about it, whether it's sport or business or whatever it is, life will become a lot easier. And the way I kind of looked at it is, everyone's life at some point at home will be quite hard, or at work will be quite hard. If work is hard and life is good at home, you can survive. And if work is good and life at home is a little bit bad, then you can survive. But when both are bad, it's not a good place to be. And I've found that I've had amazing family that's and we do have our ups and downs and so on, but who are incredibly supportive. But I've also found that life is a lot easier at home when I'm much more passionate about what I'm doing. Like I suppose she's talked to my other half now, she would say that since I've left, and that while it's not the same degree of security or a regular paycheck each month, and I'm doing things odd hours and so on, that I'm probably a nicer person to be about because I've got a lot more passion for what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So that would be my second bit, and I suppose the reason why I was talking about having to go through all the kind of the unpaid stuff and through that is like it is a journey, and we have to take that journey, and sometimes there are colleagues of mine who talk about climbing the mountain but never actually take the first step to climb that mountain. They always want to be at the top of it but don't actually take those first steps to start climbing. And sometimes for me is like that's a limiting factor for them, as I suppose it's point 2 and 3, I suppose, but is that you have to take the first step, and that's often the hardest thing to do. And then the second bit is you have to put your one foot in front of the other and keep going, and have to work bloody hard at it, because things don't come free or come easy, and don't ever have for the majority of us. And it's very easy for me. The biggest fulfillment is, spending 15 years in an institute, having eight different roles. There was always something new to step to and step towards.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it would lead to becoming the head of strength conditioning or the head of learning, and from that. But there was always this, like, I always kept going, and that's kind of where I got to. So I think that's a bit you've got to start the journey and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I think that kind of goes back into the kind of like the passion and desire of finding something that you want to go and do. And the third bit is I always used to get asked a question, where do I want to be in 5 years? And I always felt I needed to give an answer. And like I've come to realise that I don't know where I'm going to be next year. I barely can work out what I'm going to do next week, but I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I don't think we need... I think we need that idea of the spotlight pointing in the right direction, but not honing down onto a single thing.
Yeah.
Like I kind of know where I want to go. The thing that I'm most passionate about is people, and helping people to try and be the best versions of themselves and make a difference in the world that they want to make the difference with. And that doesn't need to be in sport or in business. It can be in family or whatever. So I don't really know where I'm going, but I kind of know that's my driving principle of what I want to do. So it might still be in sport in 5 years' time, it might be in business, or it might be in charity, or it might be, I don't know, it might be something entirely different. So I don't think we need to fixate on a single point in the future and say that's where I need to be, because I think that limits our thinking, and I think it limits our opportunities. And the more I've spent time coaching and mentoring individuals and help them kind of navigate what they're thinking, the more I realise that when they start moving themselves away from the idea of I need to be in this place in 5 years' time and much closer to this is what I want it to feel like, or I want to be doing something like that. When the opportunities have arisen, they've taken them, and it is not taken them where they've expected to go, and they're absolutely thriving now and loving what they're doing. And if you'd asked them 3 or 4 years ago, did you think you'd do that? We know they said I thought I'd have to be working in sport, or I had to be a head of performance in a sports club or whatever, and actually they're doing something totally different, and they're loving it. And they might go back to where they wanted to get to, but I think the fixation of a single point in time is narrowing, and I think it's can be quite debilitating. Where I think if you know where the kind of things you want to be doing, it's liberating, and it gives you much more opportunity to see the world and all the beauty that it has around what we could do in it. So that'd be my final piece.
Love it, Alex. Fantastic. Really appreciate that. Really, really insightful, and and really interesting. So thanks very much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been nice to be able to ramble with somebody about this.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, mate. And it was great to catch up with you last month as well. So thanks for your time. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Probably through my email, which is alex@wayfaring.uk, and wayfaring is WAYFARING.uk.
Brilliant. I'll put everything you can put into a link form, so resources you mentioned and references you mentioned and email addresses you mentioned into links in the show notes.
Right, okay.
So people can click on those directly. But stay on the line whilst we finish the recording. But yeah, thanks again, mate, and all the best.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for listening to the 25th episode.
We hope you enjoyed the show. Please leave us a rating and or review on whichever platform you're listening on. Please check out our website, www.extremesportsperformance.com. On our media page, we have weekly blogs that include Thought of the Week, Exercise of the Week, Recipe of the Week, and Training Song of the Week. Each month's collection gets compiled into our monthly newsletter along with company service and store updates. You can sign up for free to receive this via our subscribe page. Our online store consists of training programs, online and in-person coaching, nutrition plans, toolbox, and interactive training systems. Please follow us on our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. Links to these can be found at the bottom of every page on our website or via any search engine. That's all for now. Until next time, take care.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.